With a buffet of different dieting options available, sometimes we forget to look at the basics, like how to read a food label. You see, oftentimes knowing what exactly to look for on a food label can help us make good decisions about our food choices. While this probably sounds easy enough, it can get confusing when you think about serving sizes, carbohydrate, fat, and protein numbers, and vitamin and mineral content. And just trying to sort out all of the small print ingredients listed at the bottom of the label can take an advanced degree. And to complicate things further is the fad-based side of nutrition and overabundance of pseudo-experts that market very well in order to sell their products. The food industry is like any other industry, and it's designed to make money. It's among the top advertisers in the United States. In 2012, $116 million was spent on marketing for fresh fruits and vegetables. You might think, wow, that's a lot of money on advertising. Well, I did too, until I saw that the marketing for fast food topped out at over $4.6 billion the same year. And think about how many labels are on a box of food that try to convince you to buy and eat. The labeling claims are designed to make you think that products are better for you. You are bombarded with slogans like healthy choice and certified organic. But do you really need labels to convince you that a food is a healthy choice? I hope not. But here's an interesting fact. The Food and Drug Administration actually has data to show that when the package has labels on the front, you are less likely to read the nutrition facts panel, where the more reliable information can be found. It's also difficult to stay away from foods with enticing descriptions. You've probably noticed this too when you eat out at a restaurant. You don't often see menu items listed as simply fish or beef. Instead, you see descriptive words like Chilean seafood fillet or Omaha tender beef. Which one would you be more likely to buy? And these evocative descriptions and these names are rated as more appealing and tasty. Without a doubt, big politics are involved in foods that are backed with serious money and marketed to you. The way to approach food, and particularly food labeling, is to be as educated as possible and then to keep a healthy skepticism when reading labels and advertisements. It's not hard to see that health-related food labeling will likely influence how you feel about certain foods and ultimately what you buy and eat. But it's probably best to limit your purchases of packaged foods and ones with excessive health claims. So, how do you know what to do? Where are the rules that we should follow in the grocery store? How can we decipher a food label and know what we are really looking for? What can we really identify as important for improving our body composition, recovery, or for optimal aging? Well, there's no perfect formula, magic food group, or even a cursed aisle of the supermarket. Rather, there are poor options, better options, and best options. In this lecture, we will go over how food you consume each day, what your dietary intake should look like, and how to interpret each section of the nutrition facts label. The first question is often, how much food should I eat? Again, like most difficult questions, the answer is, it depends. It depends on who you are, how old you are, how big or how small you are, how much muscle you have, what your sex is, and what goals you specifically have. And these basic indicators will dictate the energy requirements of your body in general. So let's visit them one by one. First is age. At different stages in our lives, we have different energy demands. That is, different amounts of calories that we need to live optimally. Think of a child who is constantly growing and developing until the onset of puberty. In comparison to their size, a child will likely require more calories than an adult while they are growing so fast. And during certain events like pregnancy and breastfeeding, or recovery from injury or disease, we have increased energy demands, requiring a higher number of calories per day. And if you become more sedentary as you age, you will also require fewer calories. But if you choose to maintain or increase your activity as you age, your calorie intake will stay up. However, be careful here. Older adults often don't eat enough calories due to a variety of factors, including a loss of appetite. So based on which stage of life you're in, you will likely require varying amounts of calories. Next is body size. A larger person, we're talking actual body size and not fat mass, is going to require more absolute energy each day than a smaller person, assuming equal activity levels. Think of it as smaller engine versus a larger engine. The small engine just requires less fuel to continue revving compared to the larger engine. And a reasonable example is again an adult and a child. The child is growing and requires specific nutritional needs, but in absolute terms, the adult needs more calories because they have a greater body area to support metabolically. The third component to how much food we need is sex. Men tend to be larger than women. Therefore, based on the previous principle of body size alone, men will often require greater calorie intake than women. However, a second factor is the amount of muscle mass that men carry compared to women on average. And yes, many examples exist where this is not the case, but on average, men will have more muscle mass than women. So think of muscle mass as hungry tissue. Muscle tissue is highly metabolically active and demands a high energy intake to keep us moving. And with simple math, more muscle mass on your body frame equals more hungry tissue equals more food needed. Okay, with these factors in mind, you have an idea of what your basic energy demands are compared to your spouse or your best friend or your neighbor. But there's more to the equation. What does your typical day look like? Are you sitting at a desk all day long? Or are you training for a marathon? Or like most people, are you somewhere in between? Your relative activity level also determines how much food you need to eat every day. If you exercise a lot, you will probably need more food to refuel and recover. But there are also times when you would not want to replenish your energy stores completely. And the food you require depends on your specific goals. So, are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to put on 5 pounds or 2.25 kilograms of muscle mass? In both of these cases, losing or gaining, total caloric intake will be different. And so will the components of that calorie intake, which I will go into later in this lecture. Another area we cannot ignore is your genetics. For example, do you have a tendency to gain weight or to lose weight easily? And what does your family look like? Answers to these questions are important. However, a lousy or a fantastic genetic predisposition must be massaged by the other factors that we can control. So you can see that your individual characteristics, your goals, and your training status, and even your genetics can influence your daily energy needs. In the research lab, using specialized equipment and calculations, we can also determine your calorie needs. Now, you might have noticed that on nutrition labels, certain nutrients are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. And by now, you know that not everyone eats a 2,000 calorie diet. Well, this just reflects the average intake of an average sized person to maintain weight and serves as the most basic starting point for many people. But because some people might require 1,500 calories and others well over 4,000 calories per day, the percentages listed on the nutrition facts label must be adjusted case by case. Also, keep in mind that to convert calories to kilojoules, you simply multiply by 4.2. So, based on all of these factors, you know roughly how much food you should eat per day, and we'll go into more detail about this in an upcoming lecture. But how do you apply this information to what you see on a food label? Let's say that you're 40 years old, 5 foot 10 inches tall, and weigh about 160 pounds and are generally active. Well, using a metabolic calculator, you see that you should eat roughly 2,300 calories per day to maintain your body weight. So now what? Should your only goal be to go out and consume 2,300 calories regardless of where those calories come from? Well, this brings up the classic argument of, is a calorie, regardless of if it's 200 calories of pizza or 200 calories of cake or 200 calories of broccoli. Based on this logic and your 2,300 calorie per day goal, you could consume any of the following to hit your needs: 575 jelly beans, 4 Big Macs, 385 stalks of celery, or a variety of nutrient-dense foods, all chosen to promote energy, lean mass accumulation, fat loss, and disease prevention. So, do you think of these food choices that they have the same effect on your body composition and overall health? Well, they all add up to 2,300 calories, right? I bet that your common sense tells you that this is not the case. And while these examples are extreme, they make an important point. If you consumed primarily calories from simple sugars each day, the 575 jelly bean example, you might not gain any weight overall, but you could be sure you are missing a ton of nutrients that your body requires to function well, and over time, this would alter your body composition and health for the worse. Importantly, the readout on your scale probably won't change, and you may go on thinking that all is well. But internally, the story could be much different. Chances are good that you would develop compromised metabolic, immune, and inflammatory function that at best would not allow you to function optimally, and at worst could lead to serious conditions like blood glucose and lipid abnormalities and possibly chronic disease. Okay, so the answer is pretty obvious here. While we need to be aware of the amount of calories that we eat, it is probably more important to worry about the quality of those calories. For example, let's compare 100 calories from jelly beans to 100 calories from spinach, which is about 14 cups of raw spinach. The jelly beans have 28 grams of carbohydrate, all coming from simple sugars. The spinach, however, has about 14 grams of carbohydrate. And the spinach also contains about 10 to 14 grams of protein, exceptional daily values for vitamin A and C, as well as small to moderate amounts of iron and calcium. You can see that even though these two foods have the same calorie density at 100 calories each, the spinach offers a much higher nutrient density, meaning a lot of nutrients with few calories. The spinach has dietary fiber, protein, and a number of vitamins and minerals. And you'd have to eat a lot of it just to get those 100 calories. Essentially, eating nutrient-dense foods provides a way for you to have more bang for your buck. In fact, many participants in my studies or clients that I've worked with begin eating these foods and find that they have to eat quite a bit of the quality foods to meet their calorie needs. Essentially, you really can eat more and weigh less. In fact, entire books have been written on the topic of, is a calorie really a calorie? But how do you know what the nutrient density is of your foods? Well, it's simple. Check the food label. Here, I will teach you exactly how to do it. Does this sound daunting? Well, don't let it be. I've worked with many people who just need a little direction on what to look for. And once you know, it's simple. Oh, here's an example of a nutritional label for macaroni and cheese. The first thing to look for is the serving size, located in the top left corner of the label. The serving size is important because this is the portion that all of the nutritional information is based on. So if you choose to eat more or less of the serving size listed, your nutritional intake will also be higher or lower for all of the nutrients. For example, if the label shows that a serving is only 1 cup and you eat 2 cups of that food, then you need to multiply everything on the label by 2. Make sure you are aware of your serving size when reading the label. And the next thing to do is examine the total number of calories for the given serving size located on the top of the label. This gives you an idea as to how much of this product is going to contribute to your entire day's intake. You now know that the quantity of calories is less important than the quality of calories. But at some point, you need to be aware of it and just make sure you're not eating too much or too little to support your goals. Now, I'm not a big fan of counting calories, but when just starting out on the journey to improve your body composition, it can be an effective tool until you get the hang of what foods make you feel good, perform well, and improve your body composition. Now, just below where the total calories are listed, you'll start to see a list of all of the nutrients provided per serving, including total fat and the types of fat, cholesterol, sodium, carbohydrates, and sugars, and lastly, protein. All of these values are given in grams and also in a percent daily value. So, what does this mean? Well, remember when I mentioned the common phrase, based on a 2,000 calorie diet? Well, this is precisely what the percent daily value relates to. Here, the label provides consumers with a general estimate of how much this serving of this particular food will contribute to the overall recommendations for each nutrient each day based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So, if you eat more or fewer than 2,000 calories per day, these percentages will also change. For example, if you eat more than 2,000 calories, the percent of your daily diet listed on the label will decrease. And if you eat less than 2,000 calories, then the percent listed on the label will increase. Now, the percent daily values might be useful for some people, but are really most valuable in pointing out red flags, when certain nutrients are extremely high or when certain nutrients are extremely low or non-existent. At the bottom of the food label, we will see the amounts of certain vitamins and minerals like vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron. This gives you a better idea of the nutrient density of the food you choose to eat. You should choose higher values of these nutrients compared with a lower calorie amount on the label. The food is typically paired with a list of ingredients contained in the product. The higher up on the list, the greater relative amount of the ingredient in the food. So if you see an ingredient list with wheat flour, oat flour, cornstarch, salt, guar gum, cane juice, you would know that the wheat flour, the first item listed, has the greatest relative amount in that food. You want to see more natural and unprocessed ingredients towards the beginning of the list. And some people say this should be names that you can read and pronounce. And I agree to an extent, but sometimes there are just long names in a perfectly fine food to eat. So I think it's a good idea, though, to choose foods with as few ingredients as possible in order to have a better idea of how processed that food is that you're eating. But today, almost everything is processed to some degree, and this is usually for food safety. So choose foods that are minimally processed as you can. A food label is also great if you need to identify anything that could trigger an allergy. It is in the ingredients list of the label that you would identify any particular ingredient to avoid. Just be careful, because the front label advertising needs to be compared to the small print on the nutrition facts label about where the particular product was processed. In our research, we always tell potential subjects if the food or supplements we are asking them to consume were produced in a factory that co-processed any potential allergenic foods like wheat or shellfish. Now, just keep in mind that if you are unsure about a food or a name on the label, it's better to stick with the motto of, when in doubt, leave it out. It seems easy enough. However, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, proposed a change to the label. And that new label was proposed in order to identify a few specific things. The serving sizes are now going to be listed as bigger and bolder. They are also updated to reflect more realistic serving sizes. For example, right now ice cream has a serving size of just a half cup. The changes would increase the serving size to a more realistic size of 1 cup. Likewise, for soda, instead of an 8-ounce serving, it will be 12 or 20 ounces, the amount people typically eat or drink. And the calories will be listed in a larger font. And added sugars must also be listed on the label. And there will be other small changes to reflect current nutrition and food science. Now, it should be an improvement to help you quickly read and understand more about exactly what you're eating. So there you have it, the very complex nature of the food label simplified for your use. And your ability to translate the food label will aid tremendously in your quest to know more about what you're eating and help with any body composition changes that you may want to make in the future. Now, you know the food label language. How does this help to make more consistent, good decisions for the food that you buy and eat? Well, it will only help if you take just a little bit of time to actually look at the label and interpret it if the food has a nutritional makeup and a quality to meet your goals. For example, take into account the fact that carbohydrates and proteins each provide about 4 calories per gram, but fats provide more at 9 calories per gram. And you should have an idea of what the recommended ranges are for you to try and eat of each nutrient based on the things like your age, your weight, and your sex. But keep in mind that current science continues to update the recommendations that you should follow. And it may take some getting used to. Reading nutrition labels takes time and makes grocery shopping take a lot longer when you first do this. So let's go through a food label and consider some very general rules of thumb. Well, the first thing I would do is make sure that you get the right amount of protein in your diet. It's clear that protein is vital to normal body function and improved body composition. It keeps you full and less likely to gorge at other meals. But how do you know the correct amount to consume? Well, I'm a fan of using hand sizes to estimate your needs, but it can be good to count calories for a short period of time until you get into a good routine. So simply determine your protein needs based on the numerous factors that we discussed, like age, sex, and your goals. Most people will fall somewhere between 1 and 1.5 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass for your protein needs. Again, for a 150-pound or 68-kilogram person, this would be between 70 and 100 grams of protein per day. Then read the label to see how much protein you are eating with each meal. And then just add up the grams of protein and multiply by 4, the conversion factor for protein grams to protein calories. And now you have your calorie intake from protein. In my research showing improvements in body composition with higher protein, I asked participants to include a good protein source at each meal. It could be eggs in the morning, a protein shake, lean meats, or combinations of vegetables, seeds, beans, and nuts. And once your protein is dialed in, use the nutrition facts label to look at your carbohydrate intake. Now, you may be surprised at just how many carbohydrates and sugars are in common foods that you eat. They may be simple sugars like fruits and juices, or complex starches like whole grains and vegetables. Also, many empty calories are typically high in carbohydrates, things like candies, sodas, and many juices and white bread. And one good approach is to try and limit the amount of simple sugars you eat or drink and choose more complex starches instead. These foods, like vegetables and whole grains, usually have more fiber too. So on the food label, compare the total carbohydrate value to the amount of sugar and fiber in the product. Now, is there a high amount of sugar compared to the total carbohydrate value? If so, this is probably a simple carbohydrate that should be limited. The only exceptions being certain disease conditions and maybe for some very active people during exercise. But is there a high amount of fiber and a low amount of sugar compared to the total carbohydrate in the product? Well, this is probably the better day-to-day option. And keep in mind, though, that at some level, sugar is sugar, whether it's from added sugars, natural sugars, or refined sugars. It all counts towards your sugar or carbohydrate intake. And some recent research even shows that we may be better able to choose our carbohydrates based upon the ratio of carbohydrates to fiber in grams per serving that are listed on the nutrition label. So if the ratio is greater than 10:1 for carbohydrates to fiber, the recommendation is to avoid this food. If the ratio is less than 10:1, it is likely a good choice. And if the ratio is less than 5:1, this is a great choice. For example, if your drink has 25 grams of sugar and only 1 gram of fiber, this is a 25:1 ratio and will be classified as a food to avoid by this scale. Now, this is not perfect because it doesn't include the glycemic index, but it may lead you to better carbohydrate choices. Lastly, you should try to identify whole grains or oats as the first ingredient on the list at the bottom of the label for carbohydrate foods. Now, a range of 45 to 65% of carbohydrate intake in your total diet is typically recommended. For body composition purposes, much of the current research is indicating that the lower end of this spectrum is likely a good thing. This means smart carbohydrate choices, as with all nutrients, at each meal. So the next logical question is, what about fats? Well, the first thing is that when you are eating lean meats, and you often have both protein and fat in the food, so sometimes you don't have to actively seek out more fat to eat. But there are definitely times when a good mix of the types of fat need to be considered, or total fat needs to be increased or decreased. The good news is that you can find all of the fat information on the label too. So consuming certain types of good fats can actually help to improve body composition. So how can that be the case? Well, as we've discussed, fats are generally more satiating than either proteins or carbohydrates, meaning that they leave you feeling full longer and stop you from reaching back for a second helping or snack. And fats are absolutely necessary for many body processes and are the main fuel for the body at rest and during low to moderate intensity activity. So, how many calories should come from fat each day? Which fats are better for us and which fats get the bad rap? How can you distinguish this on the food label? Well, there's no gram per day recommendation for fat. Instead, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA, provides a general range based on the percentage of your total dietary intake, including about 20 to 35% of your total calories coming from fat. But new research shows that many people are successful with more fat than this and still improve body composition and health. So a better way to consider fats is by the types of fats. And choosing a good mix of poly, mono, and saturated fats is a good idea. Also, limiting omega-6 fatty acids from excessive intake of vegetable oils and pre-made dressings, and increasing intake of omega-3 fatty acids from fish, nuts, and seeds is another good idea overall. Also, as of January 2006, trans fats have been required to be on the nutrition facts label. These rarely occur naturally and are considered the really bad guys of nutrition. They are formed when liquid oils are made to be solid, a simple way to increase the shelf life of products. Essentially, they are man-made by hydrogenation, where the hydrogen ions are forced into the fat to change its chemical makeup. The reason they're known as lethal is because not only do they increase bad cholesterol, but they also decrease good cholesterol and are directly related to heart disease risk. In fact, in November 2013, the FDA concluded that partially hydrogenated oils could no longer be considered as GRAS, or generally recognized as safe. After lots of bad publicity, manufacturers have decreased the amount of trans fats found in our foods significantly. But trans fats are still found in many snack-type foods, cookies, crackers, and food fried in partially hydrogenated oils. Refer to the ingredients list to avoid being tricked. Some products will report 0 trans fats on the nutrition label, but hydrogenated oil in the ingredients list. Well, partially hydrogenated oils are the alter ego of trans fats. The two are equivalent. So it's best to try and avoid foods high in trans fats by reading the labels carefully. But give yourself a break because they are hidden in many of your favorites, I bet. And a great place to start your fat intake, one of the high quality kind, is to make it about 20 to 35% of your total calorie intake. Remember that for fat calories, you need to multiply the fat grams by 9, not 4, as you did for both protein and carbohydrates. This means that fat has the highest calorie count per gram of the macronutrients. So if by chance you aim for 60 to 100 grams of fat per day, this equals between 540 and 900 calories from fat alone. And one interesting side note is that alcohol provides about 7 calories per gram, making it more energy dense than either carbohydrates or protein. So besides the big three, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, also consider the sodium and cholesterol content of foods if you know you have a poor family or personal disease history with these nutrients. Otherwise, new research indicates far less concern than originally thought. Also, look at the amount of micronutrients in your food, including vitamins and minerals. A few will be listed on your food label. It is best to aim for about 100% of the micronutrients in your daily diet from all meals and supplements. So, to summarize, let's re-examine some key points. Your diet quality is the most important aspect to improving body composition because all calories are not created equal. As it is often said, consider eating better rather than just eating less. And know what foods to look for on the nutrition facts label. This can help you to identify better choices. Look for protein in your food choices, see what types of sugars you are consuming, and aim for quality fats. And take your time on your next visit to the grocery store. Try to use your knowledge of the food label to make the best choices you can. If your food choices don't pass with flying colors, don't worry. You will gradually become more attuned to what's a poor option and what's a better option and what's the best option. There is no perfect diet, just better combinations of foods than others. And those nutrition facts tell us about the quality and the quantity of the calories in our diet. Eventually, you will easily read labels and then enjoy the freedom of not having to count calories. Instead, you will look for nutrient-dense foods that nourish your body and improve your health and body composition. It will literally feel like you can eat more and feel better. So try this. Read your nutrition facts labels for the sugar content and aim to reduce the amount of added sugars in your overall diet.